My name is Heath Gascoigne. I'm the host of the Business Transformation podcast, and this is the show for business transformators who are part business strategists, part business designers, part collaborators, and part negotiators. Business transformators have moved past just business design and includes oversight of implementation of those business designs and business transformations, and includes stakeholder management, coordination, and negotiation. If you work in strategy development and implementation, and you work to ensure that it is aligned to the business design and technology, then you're probably a business transformator. This is the show where we speak to industry experts and professionals to share their stories, strategies, and insights to help you start, turn around, and grow your business transformation. Welcome to the Business Transformation podcast. And in this episode, we're talking to one of those industry experts. We are talking to Ashleigh Dueker, Principal Consultant, Agile Transformation at PA Consulting. Ashleigh's background is in change and agile transformation, helping organizations increase the ability to respond effectively and quickly to disruption and grasp opportunities for innovation. 7 years ago, she joined the Agile community for the stand-ups and 2 pizza parties and stayed for the people. Prior to finding her home in Agile, she worked in public health in the US and West Africa, developing and leading change and transformation activities in local communities. Outside of work, she leads the Agile Leadership Network of over 1,800 Agile leaders, hosting meetup sessions and regularly banting with industry thought leaders alongside Giles Lindsay. Ashleigh has her MBA from Lancaster University and a bachelor's in psychology, PM Agile certified practitioner, and a certified SAFe 5 program consultant. Welcome to the Business Transformation podcast, Ashleigh. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with me. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Great way to start the new year.
Yeah. We just had a quick briefing before the talk, and you gave me a little bit of a background into what you're doing. You recently just did a public speak on something that I'm quite passionate about the people element of business transformation. But also, you gave a little insight about something that I also like is about the culture part of really organizations and transformation. And I think it's like, I've mentioned this with a previous guest about this work from home trend right now is what I think is similar to the outsourcing roles to Africa, to Asia, to the cheap cost locations. But what they end up doing is they brought those roles back on shore because of the customer experience wasn't the same. So what I think now is happening with this work from home culture is that the silent victim who has no spokesperson right now is the culture. You're actually going to kill the culture by having this, everyone else is working from home and not collectively in the same building. Like that people element of transformation that I think is missing right now.
Yeah. Agreed. No, 100%. And it's really hard because we're learning and growing together and how to navigate this new landscape, right? And when we are able to go into the office, it's a completely revolutionized experience now where it's for collaboration typically. And then we go home and we work from home and have our focus time at home, right?
Yep.
So how do you build and grow that culture? Because we're 2 years into this now. And, this is this norm is here to stay. So it's not a temporary approach anymore. So how are we building and managing cultures and maintaining them and evolving them, especially amid, trends we see now of the Great Resignation, where a lot of folks went off during COVID. And I don't know about you, Heath, but a lot of the companies that I work with, everyone is struggling to find people and retain people.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that about when I did my MBA a few years ago now, that they called it executive MBA, where everyone worked in like satellites around the country, and this is in Australia. And so at any time in the week, you could go attend a lecture as if you were in Adelaide or if you're in Perth or Sydney, but then you'd come together for the focus for the collaborative work and then work remotely for everything else. But when everyone was together, that was where all the fun stuff happened, but also where I think the most value was gained, as opposed to working remotely on your own, focus time.
Yeah, because a lot of us, we're working in these, complex systems that are really adaptive and they're self-organizing. So there are different ways. We all have our different frameworks and tools and approaches for business transformation.
Yep.
Every management consultancy, every business, courses, certifications, we all have similar but different approaches, right? For the brilliant basics on
Mm-hmm.
looking after the core things like set your vision and approach,
Yep.
look after the op model and how are you defining the new target operating model and business design, the leadership component, the people culture, the change management component, and then how do you deliver value in that governance and PMO piece. And there are loads of different tools, right? We have Lean, we've got Six Sigma, we've got Waterfall, we've got Agile, we've got all types of tools in our tool belt. But some things that I see time and time again is people not appreciating the bounded applicability of tools, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what outcomes do people want to achieve in their transformations? And just going back to the brilliant basics and getting those right. What outcomes do you want to achieve? What is the situational complexity or complicated nature that you're working within? Use the right tools. But then, if we're working within complex environments, which most of us are,
Mm-hmm.
it's people and these interactions and this emergence of idea. That's what's going to solve complexity. And by complexity, I mean situations where you can agree what the problem is, but no one person can agree on what exactly the solution is. What's
Solutions.
best
Yep.
practice, the solution out of this, right? That's what I mean by complex
Yep.
versus, complicated is we know that there's a problem and we can more or less agree what the solution is. And then there's wicked, which is like, I don't know, climate change. People where you can't really agree on what
Yeah.
the
No one
problem
can
is, let
agree.
alone how to
Yep.
solve it. But in this complex area where many businesses are playing, it is emergence of ideas that will help unlock and find the solutions and help the systems still be dynamic and evolve over time, right? And to get to that state of emergence, we can use tools to get there, but I often still find people confusing tools for purpose, right? And not getting the best out of people and our interactions, and how do you get that emergence of ideas in a safe space.
Yeah, I think you touched on a key point there about I think the use of tools, and I think maybe the dependence on tools, thinking
Yeah.
that the tool is the answer. I have
Or the
used,
process, right? The tool or
yeah,
a process.
yeah. It's so I try to promote that. Like you listed a few, the tools there, Lean Six Sigma and or Lean and Six Sigma, and then they've got whole BPM and process management and
Mm-hmm.
BPMN and all the other stuff. Now, it's not so much what I say to my clients and even students is that it's not the tools, it's the skill of the practitioner in using those tools. You got to understand the context. You got to understand, the 2 points I push of the applicability of
Mm-hmm.
applying it to the right degree and in the right context. Otherwise, you'll just be like, mostly technical guys get a bit of a, I don't know, maybe the wrong end of the stick occasionally, that they run around with their hammer thing in technology, and every problem is a technology one, and therefore I can solve it with this. Yeah, and it's like
Yeah,
it's the
because
same
it
thing.
feels good, right? You get some satisfaction out of thinking that you're doing stuff. I'm doing stuff and I'm doing good stuff, and it feels good, right?
Yeah.
But that's an illusion,
Mm-hmm.
because what outcomes are you actually working towards and achieving? And that's the question, right?
Yeah.
Are we doing the right thing? Not are we doing the thing right? Are we
Mm.
doing the right thing?
Yes. Yeah. That is a big difference.
Mm.
And we're doing the right thing. Like I start most of the transformations I get involved in is what's the vision, and then this word vision gets morphed into, well, that's our mission. So and so,
Yeah.
well, no, well, the mission is a purpose. This is why you
Yeah.
exist. The vision is like the North Star, and this is the
Yeah.
outcome you want to achieve. What does that look like? And then they get to this 25,000 foot really lofty statement, and it's like, well, that okay. If you're actually going to achieve that, how are you
Mm.
going to do that? So, what
Yep.
strategies are you going to employ? And they go, well, actually, we haven't actually thought that far,
Mm.
and so we've got to ground it. Yep.
Sorry, no, go
Yeah.
on.
You got to ground it in reality.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just ends up being a throwaway comment. And to the people point is,
Yeah.
if the people, which they will see it from their perspective of the
Mm.
what's in it for me, the WIIFM, and if they can't see in their vision statement, which is the sole reason they exist, they
Mm.
go,
Mm.
well, I can't see where I'm involved in this
Yeah.
vision. So I'll tell you what, how much involvement I'm going to provide.
Yeah, 100%. It's people, it's not that we don't like change, because change is good, right?
Mm-hmm.
We resist being changed,
Yeah,
being
yeah.
forced to change and
Mm.
not being engaged and collaborated with.
Yep.
And we all have different perspectives. And I know diversity is a really hot topic right now.
Yeah.
Um, but often what I hear about diversity and the diversity agenda is things like, how do we tolerate differences and treat others equally without prejudice? But for me, and with my background, which, my career started in a tribe in the Saharan Desert in West Africa for years. So I have I learned a lot of indigenous ways of working and kind of tribal mentalities, and that really impacted. And with my neuropsychology degree in
Mm-hmm.
undergrad, that really impacted how I see the world. And I live in the UK now. I'm from America, so lots of cross cultural just
Mm.
things that I've picked up over the years. And to me, diversity is an asset. It's not an issue to be managed. You have to have different viewpoints.
Yep.
And there's this phrase that we used to say in a village I lived in where you stand in a gully and see the rainbow, and a person is standing on the hill seeing the same rainbow but from a different angle. And you have to share each other's perspectives to see
Mm.
the whole, right?
Yep.
And we all perceive the world differently, and we perceive the same situations differently,
Yep.
right? So when you're talking about that vision and mission and case for change and
Mm.
setting those brilliant basics, right?
Yep.
Say happy path, you do know what that is. And we more or less can help bring people on that journey, right? You have clarity, you know where you're going. But what about if you don't? What
Mm.
if you have complex situations where you don't know the answer and you need people to come together to share their different perspectives? And this is where I think just going back to the brilliant basics of learning from different cultures and how can we build trust
Yep.
and respect and listen, truly listen without judgment, and bring these ideas together. Agile methodologies really tap into that, where they essentially, the way that they promote leadership and ways of working is delegate authority to people that have the knowledge who can make the right decisions, at pace. And I I often, when I'm going into new businesses or giving talks, I often like to ask the question, or people can raise their hand or do a poll or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
of who right now is in a leadership position, who right now is in a leadership role. And that is really insightful to me, the answer, because a lot of times you'll have maybe 50%,
Yep.
60% raise their hands. And then I challenge them that every single person is in a leadership role because we have a duty of care to everyone that we work with. Even if we are the most junior person
Mm-hmm.
in role profile on
Yep.
that team, we all have a duty of care to look after one another and come together to find and create interesting, bizarre, wild, and wonderful solutions to these complex problems.
Okay, so you said an interesting point there. I think when you asked the question, people might have seen it from a perspective of
Mm,
leadership position of, do you have leadership in your title? But where it
mm,
is, no, you actually have leadership in your behavior.
yeah.
Yeah, and that maybe it comes from the culture part of
Mm,
the people feel empowered, but that even though they might not have leader in their title, that they
yeah.
still have leadership in their ability to behave as if they have that power. Um,
Mm,
you talked about culture, and I think a key part there about trust, like the All Blacks talking about what
mm,
you talk about culture and your background growing up in Africa with different tribes. Like I'm born
mm,
in New Zealand, and Maori culture and tribes is that's one and the same. Um, and people wonder how the All Blacks is almost unbeatable.
yeah.
The world winning, number, like the most successful team. They're like, you're missing the point. It's the culture. That's why they're so good, because
Mm,
that what you just said, the trust part.
yeah.
They think like one people. The one person, the whole team of 15 people is actually one person, and so it's an extension of one. They read each other's minds because they think and behave like one thing.
Mm,
Yeah, that culture part, I think it is major overlooked, and that's maybe what you
mm.
talked about, the complexity or the of transformations. Is it's not around the process, and it's not around the technology. It's
You have
the
to have it though. You have to
oh,
have it, right?
mm-hmm,
You absolutely have to have the brilliant basics. Without that, it won't work. You have to have it, but then you have to go beyond that, right?
Yep.
And the All Blacks, that's such an interesting case study. I studied that in my MBA too. They're in a Harvard Business Review, I think,
Oh,
actually.
well. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not
genuinely.
surprised. Yeah, not surprised.
Yeah.
What a
Their
great
team
brand.
success. And I think they studied fewer moves and mastered them instead of practicing all moves over and over and over again. They practiced fewer and became experts in them. And that was a real USP for them as well. But yeah, the culture point. And culture, I'd really like to explore this a bit more with you on this call, because culture can be a bit woolly, or it can just be something where, people just pay a bit of homage to we need to work on the culture, right? Let's look at Lalu and look at the culture web and, do some semi-structured interviews and some surveys to understand the as-is state, and then map the to-be, and then we can create our plan on how to get there, right?
Yep.
And it's all very, it's very scientific and ordered. And, we all wish that we could live in this rational world, which we all know that we don't. We like to think we're rational beings, but we're not. So yeah, I think for me, there are just some real brilliant, simple things that we can all do to start facilitating, building this trust and building a culture. Because it goes without saying, this, we all, like anyone who works in transformation knows that even if you aren't focusing on your culture, it's still there. It is always there.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whether you are acknowledging it and working with it or not, it will be there.
Yeah, that's
So,
the culture. The culture eats strategy for breakfast, regardless of how great.
Yeah, Dueker.
Oh, yeah.
And it does.
Yeah.
It
And people,
does.
people ignore that, and like this client I'm helping now, I might have mentioned it on a previous podcast, is that they wanted they had the name of the project, had in the name of the project had the term optimization. And I said, I don't think actually what you're trying to do is optimize this process. You are actually, what you're doing through this process of creating projects was you are enhancing or creating new business capabilities. And so in order to do that, you want to, at the moment you are, let's say you are in oil and gas, but you want to be in all things energy. How do you do that through your projects? So what you're doing is you are actually creating, enhancing new business capabilities that do two things. They either stay with your business and make money, or stay with the business and cost money. But if you do a really good job, they'll stay with the money, the business, and you'll make money, but you'll be able to do it again, quicker, cheaper, and then you can turn the ship. And they said, yeah, that's what we want to do. I said, okay, if that's what you want to do, what you're talking about is not optimization, it's transformation. And they said, oh yeah, that's what we want to do. I said, okay, but now we're calling it a transformation. We're going to change the name of the project. The big elephant in the room right behind us is these transformation projects got a massive 70% failure rate. So we're up against it from day one. And I said, oh, okay. And I said, do you know the four main causes? And I said, no. I said, well, lack of business user involvement, lack of senior leadership support, changing requirements, 100%. And incomplete requirements. And they said from the first one, I said, the lack of business involvement, I think you've got good engagement. I said, what you don't have is leadership. No one from the top wants to put their hand up and support this project. So I can tell you how well it's going to go.
Yeah. And, best processes and tools in the world, that it's not going to solve that red tape. The red tape that you find in businesses, the bureaucracy, meeting culture, whatever the case may be, not getting the leadership buy-in because they each have their own specific points of view or what they're trying to get out of this, different agendas. Tools and frameworks aren't going to solve this stuff.
Yeah.
The people side, the people skills, which I hate that it's called soft skills, just like Simon Sinek. They're people. These are human skills. They're not soft. They're human skills, right? How can you break that down? How can you break down those barriers and get the people aligned, right? So I think it just comes back to simple stuff for me. Like, start with respect and really listen to everyone, every point of view, because you realize you cannot solve this alone, or one agenda times 12 or however many is in the leadership team, etc. That's not going to solve the problems alone, and it's not going to get the outcomes that you want to achieve alone, right? We're all solutions to complex problems takes a lot of dissimilar points of view, and we're all interconnected. So we have to respect and hear all points of view, remove hierarchy, be reciprocal with how we're listening, and, be warm. There's a great HBR article called Connect Then Lead, where, what's it better to, so there are two main components, two main characteristics that we judge in other human beings. I mean, sure, there's a lot of characteristics, but the two that always come up with like 90% of all cases on how do we actually judge others, it's on two characteristics. How lovable are they? AKA, how warm and trustworthy are they? Versus how fearsome are they? AKA, strength and competence, right? And often in many of our organizations, people start with competence of, I've done this, these are my creds, this is my expertise, right? Instead of connecting with the people, you start with the creds. But that starts from a back foot where you can put people off and drive fear behaviors and worry and stress and drive bad day behaviors. So you do need both, but start with the warmth and genuinely care to connect with people, listen, respect them, and then show those fearsome behaviors, right? And your competence. And oscillating between those is really how you can engage and lead and just go on the journeys together as a leader.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about there about I think the likable, lovable, warm, trustworthy is like in marketing you would say the know, like, and trust. And so you've built some form of rapport, and now you can come through with the
trust, influence, join, disarm, put out the fires. When you and I go into a lot of organizations, they're struggling, right? They're struggling with their transformations. There's a lot of failure. There's a lot of different agendas being pushed. Put out the fires and diffuse. Get those brilliant basics, the vision, op model, leadership, people, culture, change, governance, all of that, but disarm, diffuse, and get people to listen and respect and value the different points of view, realizing that even when people share weird and wonderful ideas, even if those aren't potentially good ideas in and of themselves, they might spark one that is, right? That might spark a good idea. And we're dynamic, and we have to go through this period of collaboration and emergence and, bringing in continuous improvement and Kaizen and just constantly questioning, because it's hard to ask these questions and be honest of, are we still doing the right thing? Are these the right outcomes? Are we doing the right stuff to achieve these outcomes? And ask over and over and over again.
I think, you raise a good point there about collaboration. And I think, like in brainstorming sessions, like I have led a few transformations, and one of them, I won't name any names, but you could probably work out who it is, that as part of the brainstorming, really it was the vision, the strategy, objectives and measures exercise with the SMT, the senior management team. I said, we're going to brainstorm this as sticky notes on the wall here, and no one's going to talk for 2 minutes. And I had individual meetings with each one of the senior management team, and they had a different opinion to the director. And I said, but the director comes from this background, and they have this mindset of cost cutting, and we have a mindset of value adding, and so they're at opposite ends. And so, so how do we come up with a vision for all of us? And so I say, this is how we're going to do it. So I said, okay, you got 2 minutes, and there's no talking. Because as soon as you start talking, and that you kill the creativity, and the criticism comes in, and they say,
you go into analytic mode, don't you? Yeah.
And they say, what are you thinking that for? And this is the part about giving people the freedom to go and express themselves without risk of being judged or prejudiced. Like you said, but I think the two types of groups, the heterogeneous and the homogeneous groups. You put those groups together, the same people and diverse people, who's going to come up with more creative ideas?
Diverse.
You put engineers together, come up with great ideas, and a mix of people, the mix. So definitely, I think it's Agile is, I think people look at that almost like tools and techniques, and they go and they think that's the answer. So,
100%. Oh my gosh. Time and time again. I mean, that's the phone calls I get. Hey Ash, IT is too slow to deliver. we've got shadow IT across the organization,
Yep.
and developers saying, we're working so hard, but we're being micromanaged. People are coming to us for urgent things all the time, but we're getting thrown off with all of this. And then you've got PMO and governance saying, these teams can't estimate, they're over time and budget, we're not doing the right things. And, you hear that time and time again. And then you think, Agile will save us. And
Yeah.
then you
We're
start
going
it.
agile. Yeah.
You start it and then realize, Agile didn't save us. And then it's like, do we need to be better at Agile? Do we need to do more Agile? Are we doing this right? Are we doing enough of it? And then you try again, and it just leads to confusion and fear. But again, in this complex space where Agile works well, the tools and frameworks are there to enable emergence of idea and co-collaboration and co-creation, right? If you're in a complicated environment, again, where you more or less can come up, you kind of have a happy path to a solution, don't use Agile, right? Use the other tools in the tool belt where that is actually process over people. If you need to do Six Sigma and lean processes out and be super efficient with a 0.01% margin of error, use your Six Sigma. That is process over people, and that's fine. But you can have these dual operating systems or
Yeah.
you have to look and be aware across the landscape of the organization, what is the right tool for the job?
Yeah. That's what I was saying earlier about the applicable and the context. It's interesting. You talk about the learning or using Six Sigma. Well, one of the recent clients I was working with, they had decided within the transformation division that all the process maps must be mapped by anyone in the business, anyone who's not even in the transformation division, using BPMN notation. And if they don't know how to use BPM notation, they're going off on an offsite for 2 days to learn how to do it. And I was like, wait a minute. So you've got practitioners, pharmacists working in the research labs, and you're telling them they must go do 2 days offsite BPM notation to learn how to do process maps. So, but they're not in the process. They're not process mappers, and they're not in transformation. They're not consultants. Why are you making them do that? Well, that's the process. That's the standard we adopted. I said, well, how's that working for you? Oh, they hate it. And I was go, why is that? I said, oh, because they don't know it. I said, well, do they need it? You could just use a swim lane or a flow chart. That's good enough. I was like, you're not helping yourself. That's crazy.
I wonder where they got that idea from.
I don't know. I don't know. I think someone might have created a little cottage industry for themselves, and that was a protection mechanism to make sure that everything was done to the nth degree. But you talk about business agility.
Yeah.
You're not creating no business agility there.
No.
This is
But
yeah.
It's hard. Business agility is hard. It really is, because it's different in every organization. And you have to have courage to face into the legacy stuff, the legacy wrappers that have been accrued over the years, especially in long-standing and large enterprises, where at one point in time, a tool or process or a RAID log with 17 columns, it served a purpose.
Yep.
And then the person who introduced it, or the reason why it was introduced, dissolved.
Yep.
And something else came in, or someone else came in, new regulations, fill in the blank. But then it's just additive, right?
Yeah.
And these new processes and tools, it's just additive instead of pausing and reflecting. What do we actually need to statutorily comply with? What is best practice here? What do we actually need to do? And challenge the rest. But that takes courage, and it's really hard. And you can't, and people can get really defensive with that, even if they inherited this stuff, even if it's inherited tools and processes and standards. If they're the owners of these inherited tools, that's challenging. This is a difficult situation. So all the more reason why just, people coming together and everyone seeing themselves as a leader and having this duty of care to everyone they're working with, and building these kind of positive behaviors and interactions and holding people to account, right? Because if you want to actually change behaviors and therefore the culture, we have to have the courage to call people out when they're having bad day behaviors and take people aside and really challenge and do that. And it's hard. And sometimes it's risky for your job.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in this environment. And it's hard with reading the nonverbal communication with video calls. Thank God we have the ability to do video calls, and it's not just, camera off most of the time.
Yeah.
So you can pick up on some of that, but it is hard, and sometimes we get it wrong, right? So we need to also be able to forgive when we do mess up. But that's quite an adjustment, and I've not really seen too many tips or answers to that. Listening, like as they say, like listening with the third ear, this super effective listening where 70% of communication is nonverbal. Have you heard any tips or tricks on that in this remote world?
No, not really, to be honest. Maybe that's a new talk you can do. Yeah, non-verbal. Yeah, I think I think there needs to be some maybe best practice for use of video calls for your meetings. So I'm not a fan of having video calls and turning your camera off. So what's the point? And I would sooner say that's it. Not just to turn the videos off, turn the computer off, and come into the office, and then let's have a meeting in a room. So, if we want to get this solve these problems, the non-verbal communication where people have got their screens off. It's like, okay, what are you really thinking?
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen in the end is that your people will do what they want to do anyway. So if you don't pick up on that non-verbal, then that's a massive clue, like you said there, 70%. I think it's something like that. Like 2/3 at least. So or
at least we can designate which calls is best for having cameras on, because sometimes it is, if depending on the culture of an organization, is there a heavy meeting culture? I've had clients where I average 12 to 16 meetings every single day, literally every single day. And it's exhausting, right? And having the camera on, I have read a study where, because we can see ourselves in the corner of the screen, we end up looking at ourselves when we're talking, and that's exhausting for people because we're not used to that. We're not used to seeing ourselves all the time. So that is quite tiring. So maybe just clarifying a preference of which meetings where it's a collaborative type of engagement session where it's best to have the cameras on. And then other times where, if you don't want a camera on for this one, let's all go camera free and just have a bit of a rest, right?
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm a big fan of, although I could turn the camera off, but I'm a big fan of, because I think what the silent victim is the culture. When people people don't come into the office, you might as well, if you don't come into the office, there is no culture. You'll kill it. So when does the culture happen? Well, when you're together, when you can touch, see, feel the presence of other people, the emotional intelligence part. So if you are turning off the cameras, you are going to kill the culture. So I keep my camera on for all meetings, but people will probably think I'm a bit crazy. It's like, you know what? When these business transformations don't fail because of the technology, they fail because of the people's contribution or lack of contribution to the project.
And do they feel empowered and in a safe space where they can make the contribution? Are they even being asked for the contribution? Or are they being told what to do? Right. And, in addition to the camera, I guess there are some other things that we can be doing, which I think a lot of people have probably caught on to during this COVID world, of things like intentionally building in coffee catch-ups, or having that at the first 5 minutes or last 5 minutes of a meeting, have just a bit of a juicy gossip, right? Like have a social conversation just to catch up on things that aren't related to it. Because we can't just go get a cup of tea with people anymore and just have that catch up. So you have to be intentional with it and build it in more.
I actually was with one client who we made it like 1 hour, 4:00 on a Friday or a Thursday, because people wanted to do something on Friday. And we made that, it was either some games and someone had to plan it.
Yeah, social,
or drinking and otherwise it won't happen. I was actually having a conversation on LinkedIn with a former program manager I used to work with, and he said, no, we're 100% working from home now, no more coming to office, except for a meal. We're going to get
I
together.
love that.
And I said, isn't that
You still
funny?
need to work, but if you're coming in for the meal, may as well have a working day, right?
Yeah,
And get that collaboration together and then go out for the meal, right?
I said, so why is it that you can't just eat at your desk or in front of your computer, but you need to be sitting in the same room beside each other eating?
Yeah.
I said, do you not see that where you think that you need to be in the room to eat versus be in the room to collaboratively work is the same thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he goes,
You
no.
need both. You need to build the bonds, right, with the dinner, and then leverage the bonds, right? Leverage it in these collaborative sessions, working sessions together.
Yeah. I actually was going to write another book before I actually started writing it, but I was told not to ever publish it because I'd never get another job in the industry again. Calling out, and I said, well, maybe I don't want another job in the industry if this is the behavior, and it was about people's behavior that that if you don't have any trust and people can't speak their mind, people are just going to do what they want anyway. And then and what happens? These projects fail, and then what happens then? And then there's more money committed to it, and it goes around in a circle, and then it fails again. And there's no transformations happening here. There's just actually money getting thrown after bad money.
That just triggered another thought.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I love this. I love this bouncing ideas back and forth between one another. This is great. Your podcast is awesome.
Oh, thank you.
But change and change fatigue, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
constantly trying to go through initiatives and change fatigue. Just another element. We're just building up this picture of culture because culture is ephemeral, right? It's hard to, even anthropologists can't agree the definition of culture, but we know it's kind of the behaviors, right? You can see it in behaviors and stories and signs and symbols and all of these different ways that we interact and bring meaning with one another. But with change fatigue, that is a really important topic. And in Agile, the industry is kind of moving, for lack of a better word, like to Agile 2.0, if you will, right? Agile's been around for decades. And it's kind of morphed and everyone has a different opinion on what it means. It's changed, just like digital transformation, all things digital, everyone has a different opinion on what this means to them. But what trends I'm noticing in the industry is moving away from agile or agility towards flow, a state of flow. How can you actually minimize the perception of change and the jarring that comes with forced change, especially? And we already touched on this, right? Of engage people so that they're co-creating and collaborating on this. So it's not change being done to them, but they're part of this, shaping it together. And you do it one step at a time, and it emerges as you go down this path. But also as you start to go down that path, then you get to the point where you're just flowing, right? And especially, different op models are structured to help enable this flow with matrix style op models and, agile organizing around value, around customer lines, essentially value streams and value. Organizing that way really does help enable this concept of flow, where it minimizes and negates change fatigue and helps keep people plugged in.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the avoiding the change fatigue. That's one of the first questions I ask about what recent change have you been through, and usually it's because my interest there is around about lessons learned, about what you did well, what you want to keep doing, what you stop doing, what you want to start doing, and then most of the time it's like I remember the first project I did in the UK that the government regulator, I won't mention any names, but they'd done an insurance regulation change. And I said, this must be something similar to a banking regulation change. So, we just did that. And I said, okay, so what's the lessons learned? Oh, we didn't capture any. So how long was that project? Like 5 years? And no lessons learned. So, okay, so you wouldn't happen to have any of those old staff members on that project still here? Oh, yes. Actually, remember that going away party you went to yesterday? That was the last person who just left. You're kidding. And so, that's where you identify change fatigue, what was, what do you need to...
What's hindering us? What's not working? As you go into that state of flow and you're doing the next thing and then the next thing and the next thing. It's that constant continuous improvement loop, the feedback loop of How can we
Yeah.
be doing things slightly differently? Are we still doing the right things? What's blocking us? What can be better?
Mm-hmm.
What can change? 100%. And
Yeah.
also, I'll add a sprinkling of the growth mindset in there too, because in the past couple years, I think a lot of us in business, maybe not all, but some of us, I think, thought mental health might have been a bit woo-woo.
Oh,
And all
yeah,
of us
yeah.
now, it's not that, like, this is a real thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's been, I think all of us have at some point encountered issues with mental health in the past 2 years. And how can you lead and how can you work with your teams when you're going through this? And I find pursuing and promoting a growth mindset where instead of thinking, I can't solve this, or, oh no, another change. Oh no, another thing's gone wrong. Oh no, this happened. This is impossible. I can't solve this.
Mm-hmm.
It's changing that mindset to, we haven't found the solution yet,
Yep.
right? I haven't found the answer yet. And working together on that growth mindset and mitigating change fatigue by getting into the state of flow, and I'll just throw another final curveball into this, but purpose, a big, I think probably one of the single most important things that we can help our colleagues, ourselves, the people that we lead, the people that we manage, find to help build that resilience and build a culture in a team is finding purpose. And there are so many different types of purpose, right? Organizational purpose. Now, a lot of consumer behavior is demanding purpose-led organizations, right? And contributing back to the environment, et cetera. We're really seeing that consumer shift of preference and behavior. So you have organizational purpose, team purpose, but also your own individual purpose. And when that is challenged, how can we help people re-find their purpose? Especially when a lot of people say now, I don't know if you hear this, but I hear this, I just don't want to work anymore. It's our
Yeah.
first day back
Yeah.
in the new year, right?
Mm.
Did you hear anyone who said, oh, I was really looking forward to coming back to work today?
Yeah. No.
And
Well,
you
I
have
get.
that great resignation and all sorts of stuff going on. So how can we if we can't change our roles, how can we change our mindsets and be more of service to others? Like, there's this great story. I think it was of John F. Kennedy when he visited NASA, and he asked the janitor, oh, what do you do here? And the janitor's response was, I put people on the moon, and connecting to that higher purpose.
Yeah, yeah. His role in the whole process,
Yeah.
yeah, of the organization.
He contributes to putting people on the moon,
Mm.
So purpose is something that I think is extraordinary. And if we tap more into that and have that intrinsic motivation, um, for ourselves, for our teams, and for our organizations, that helps bring people together and helps transformations be a bit more successful. And again, to build on everything we said, you still have to have those brilliant basics. You still have to have the tools and the frameworks and the processes. Don't get me wrong. We've talked about the challenges with them and the limitations, but you do have to have them.
Oh,
But
yeah.
those alone aren't going to remove the obstacles that often businesses have, right? You have to go beyond that and go into the people sphere. Culture
Mm-hmm.
is a part of that, but it's, people and interactions and co-creation and trust and empowerment and delegation of authority, maybe not always, but where the situation calls for it, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you with the. I like your business, your brilliant basics, the vision, operating model, leadership, people and change, governance, and the part about the tools. You need
Mhm.
the tools, but you don't make the tools your crutch.
Yeah.
I think that's been the misuse maybe of
Mhm.
tools right now is that they are seen as what's that word, the panacea of, yes, we've
Mhm.
got agile,
Yeah.
we're using BPMN notation. I said
Yeah.
no, understand first the context of
Yeah.
where you're using it, and if it's suitable, then yes, how you apply it is one thing, and the context that you apply it is the other.
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
yeah, I think, when we talk about these transformations, and I'm sure for your time currently at PA and before that, these transformation projects are not small, cheap. costing projects. They're into the hundreds of millions of pounds, and they affect hundreds, if not thousands, of stakeholders. And so you get it wrong, there's no transformation, and there's lost money, lost opportunity. So we need to be doing things differently. Otherwise, we're going to repeated mistakes. No, yeah. So a lot. I reckon you could write a book. Yeah, seriously. So when's it coming out? I could tell you how long it took me to write mine. So
how long did it take you to write yours?
Wow,
I saw it's an Audible now too. The transformation book's on Audible. I saw.
Yeah, that took that recording of just the audio book was over 30 hours. There's a lot of words to read, and not just to read them, you got to read them and be clear. So that was one thing. And so but to write the book, the writing of the book was 18 months. 12 months of that was full time. And then it was another 12 months dealing with the editor and the publisher. So all in all, it was a 2.5-year project. So but at the same time, because I always want, you never do one, right? So there's 2 other books in draft. I just don't have the time to finish them. But I tell you what, some of the stuff you touched on now, which I don't see a lot of people talking about, like we talked about this earlier before the podcast started. Like there's some technical guys that have been on the podcast, and their natural probably deposition is because the technical guys is to start a technology, but all they were talking about were people. Technology, like the tools, is not the panacea. It is first understanding the people, understanding the culture, and then whatever, if a process needs to support this new ways of working and that they're enabled by technology, then hey, you got your answer. That's the solution. 100%. But that's not from the start. You don't start at technology, then add more technology and think you're going to get a transformation. No, you're probably going to get a 7% failure rate.
Yeah. And diversity, getting that diversity of thought and all the different approaches and people with the different fortes, and bringing that together in a way where you can tap into that and leverage and work with that diversity of thought, because having diversity isn't enough, right? Unless you can actually hold space where you can leverage the beauty of that emergence of idea, that's the jackpot. That's what we're all striving for, I think.
Yeah, that's a key word there, that diversity. Look, the diversity that it's getting pushed right now, I think, is you can have your diverse thinking as long as it's the same as ours.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's not diverse. Yeah. That's just, you want me to, say my piece and then then do exactly what you just said, but nothing to do with what I just suggested to you. And I think that what you said there, like the give people their space, one, to say it, but then, okay, you need to act on it now.
Yeah.
Not just a throwaway comment and go, okay, this is what I believe that we should do, and then go, okay, if we just wait long enough, they'll be quiet, and then we can go and do what we want to do.
Yeah, and the hard part there is you getting the culture to a place where leaders can act on that, right? And you can have that agility of the enterprise where you can pivot quickly and take the new information, whether that's from your own people or from the end user that you're learning from, take that information and quickly pivot and be able to make a swift decision that is well enough informed on what to start, stop, and continue.
Yeah.
Especially now, it's with the nature of business and how complex the environments are that we're working in, and competitiveness and changing consumer behavior at the drop of a hat. It's really important now. It's always been important, but it's particularly important now. And I think the trend is just going to keep continuing. And how can we attract, hire, and retain that talent and build this, right? Because you can't get this stuff overnight. Going through that forming, storming, norming, and performing cycle, that takes time. That's that you have to cycle through
formation.
That. Yeah. So this great resignation is something that I've been keeping my eye on quite closely. And that, to me, and maybe it's just me, I could be wrong, but when I think about the trends for this year and the future, the biggest threats that I see to the success of transformation isn't those brilliant basics that we talked about. We already know that. We know what we need to do, right?
Yeah,
We
yeah.
know we need to get on and do it. But when we can't attract the right talent, incentivize the right talent, invest in that talent, because in our generation, how often do you see careers in a job? You don't anymore. In fact, when I'm hiring for roles, if you look at and see someone's been in the same role for 5-10 years, you think, oh, that person doesn't have very much ambition. It's seen almost as a negative thing at times.
Yeah.
It's changed that much between generations. So there's this almost commonly accepted thought that if I want to get promoted or get a pay rise,
Need to
my
leave.
company won't do that for me unless I fight tooth and nail to get it and have an offer to hand and, hold it up to my boss and say, hey, either give me what I've been asking for and deserve, or I'm walking.
Yeah.
That threat, why? I just don't understand why, personally. But this whole, what's called the employee value proposition, looking at that attraction and retention and investing in talent and understanding what capabilities as the organization evolves and as you go through that state of flow, what capabilities are required to deliver these outcomes, and what are you going to invest in internally versus have your third-party suppliers, your partnerships, your relationships, your contractors, et cetera. What does that ideal blend look like for your enterprise? That's the happy mix, right? Where you can get this culture, because I do want to make that point quite clear. You and I are talking about people and interactions, I'm not just talking about FTEs. Most companies aren't only FTEs now.
Yeah.
It's always a blend of heavily outsourced providers or dev teams, if we're talking about the technology sense, a blend with contractors and consultants and all that. It's all of this, right? When we're talking about the people interactions, it's blending all of this.
Yeah.
So how are organizations? I just really challenge any person listening to this podcast in the future, just really think about that blend in your organization and how are you investing in the capabilities and growing that talent, and is loyalty still a dirty word? Can we start to bring this back as a positive trait that we should be
Loyalty.
striving for? Loyalty to our workforce and loyalty to organizations, and really invest in that and grow that, because those bonds, that's where the magic of long-standing adaptive organizations overcoming challenges and complexity, that's where it's going to come from, right?
Yeah. You said a lot of things there, and it's all good stuff. The tracked and a trained one, like I did the HR transformation just recently, and one of the key objectives that they had was they want to attract and retain the key staff and best staff. And so, well, why is that? Why even got that a goal? I said, well, at the moment, because of Brexit, that they had lost a revenue channel, but they now had opened up to the rest of the world. That they had the opportunity to do other things, but they didn't have the staff to do it. And they said, okay, so what does that mean, attract and retain? Well, at the moment, so why is it an issue? Because currently we can't. And I said, why not? Because we don't have the capability. And so you get, excuse me, so you unpick it and you get down to the root cause and go, okay, no, so here's the real problem. But yeah, that's all coming back again to the people element, and that capability part is like, it comes back to the first part. Where's the vision? Where you want to be? Oh, you want to be this new, let's say for HR, it was the strategic people partner or trusted people partner to help the business continuously improve. So how do you see yourself in that role? And so how do you help the business? Because we have a strategic part, the continuous improvement. And where does that come from? From our staff. And is it all? Yeah, it's like it's all cyclical. The people they talk about it, and I think it's been renamed. First, it was human resources, and then it got renamed to human capital, and I think it's now coming back to human resources again. And so that part is cyclical, but
human capital.
yeah. Yeah,
that's a whole topic for another podcast, I think. Yeah, the
what do they
people
call it?
agenda.
Yeah, the HCM, the Human Capital Management, which now it's a branded human resource management, maybe. But some major, some really good takeaways there. Thank you very much. So I want to recap what we talked about. I was writing notes the whole time. Sorry if I had my head down, but so I'm viciously writing down the notes. But I like, from what I said earlier, was the brilliant basics, and I think that organisations need to get that right. That's the starting point of, I think, if any transformation. You said the vision, which from my approach and process is it all starts with the vision. You get that vision right. Understand your operating model. Leadership is key. Like I said that one of the second causes of business transformation failure is lack of leadership.
Yeah.
So understand your leadership, and then people in change. What does that look like, and how's it going to change? And governance, like who have you got making the decisions here?
Yeah.
Like one of the key things I talk about is, if you look into your project room and your governance board, like I've been in some big UK government projects, and they have a governance authority, and it's called the Solution Design Authority. And I said, okay, so what are you making decisions about? And they said, business decisions. And I said, okay, who here is representing the business? Yep. Oh, no, not invited. And I said, well, so who's making the decisions for the business then? And they said, no, they're not invited. I said, well, okay, so this is a technology authority. And they said, well, it's actually the business authority, but the business is a bad word, so we call it solution. I said, oh my goodness, this is the starting point of the problem right here. Governance is a key part. If you can't look into your governance authority, into the board, and there's no business representatives there, that's the first call out. Yeah. You mentioned the tools and frameworks which they exist, and there's a lot out there, and they're all good to be used in two places. The applicability for the how much, to the degree, the light touch or deep detail, or then the context of, okay, is this suitable for this environment? If not, hey, maybe don't use BPM notation. Maybe use something else. There's a lot of, you had the three things on the different types of complexity. You talked about these, I think, like we call them maybe a continuum of complexity. The complexity, complicated, and wicked. And wicked being that no one agrees about what the potential solution could be.
Or what the problem is.
Yeah, even worse. Worse. Yeah. I think the emergent ideas came through as a result of diverse groups of people coming together to solve those problems, which I said the difference between homogeneous and heterogeneous groups. You've got to have different minds come together to come up with the creative ideas, and creative ideas with not being criticized, or in your words, you said to allow the freedom and the space to talk about that. So for people listening is like, yeah, okay, you can, it can't be lip service. Otherwise, and you talked about loyalty and trust. You don't get that by giving lip service.
Yeah, you have to be authentic. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what else did we cover there? I think a major part there about change fatigue. That's in the Agile 1.0 has moved to 2.0, and we're moving to a state of flow. That there is always going to be continuous change, and that continuous change might have an order to it, and that order is like a flow down the stream, if you will. But it is always moving. And the thing that is, I think, we would have said a few years ago about mental health is a little bit of a, what are you talking about? That's a little bit of a softy, little bit of a nonsense. But now in this environment, post COVID, well, if it is still post COVID, although we won't get on that subject. That this mental health is a major thing, not a thing that can be brushed under the carpet. Mental health, part of people's behavior, part of people, part of culture. You can't overlook that. I think a thing that you talked about was a major, probably it could be, maybe it's the panacea, is the purpose. And you talked about purpose on three levels: at the self or individual level, at the team level, and at the organization level. And to example that you used about JFK and the cleaner, like he saw his individual role as his ultimate purpose is part of putting people on the moon. Although his direct day-to-day tasks may not be directly involved to fueling up the rocket ship, but he saw his role as playing a crucial part in putting people on the moon. So having a clear purpose at the different levels is I think a probably key part. And the last one there about the speed of change and group formation. I think the speed of change is that we are, maybe I'm not sure what the driver is, whether it's consumer driven speed of change, that consumers change their mind so much, or it's because organizations provide their new tools or new products or new services at a speed that, and that becomes cyclical. And in the middle is an employees who have to cope with all the change.
100%. Great recap.
Wow.
Well done. We talked about a lot.
Yeah, no, well, I find it, my MBA was majored around change management, or one part of it,
right.
Which I think, that it's the overseen, overlooked element of business transformation. If you want to get more bang for buck out of your change projects, you can't ignore the people part.
Yeah.
You got to, if anything, that's where you're starting, and funnily enough, you probably end up finishing there too.
Agreed. I feel like we could talk for ages on this topic, actually.
Oh yeah, we have to have
we'll leave it there.
Yeah, we have to have a part two, and a part two, and maybe even the human capital part that we just touched on there, and we can elaborate on that. And if you've done if you do another another talk in between part two, then maybe you can fill us in on what that was and how that went, and then sort of drop a few gems for the audience.
Will do. Perfect.
Okay, Ashleigh, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much for your time on a Tuesday evening, which people won't know what an evening is when this gets published, though. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Heath. This has been fantastic. Thank you for the opportunity to come speak with you tonight and just bounce some ideas back and forth with each other.
My pleasure. Okay, thank you. Okay,
Take care.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Okay.